New fallacy. If you're ready for your asshole to explode,
No,
let's
go for it. I'm ready to
dive
go.
in.
Let's do it. The affective fallacy. Also, the romantic fallacy, emotion over reflection, quote, follow your heart. An extremely common modern fallacy of pathos. Ew. Okay. Oh, wait, it describes it for us here. Pathos. That one's emotions, urges, or quote, feelings are innate and in every case self validating, autonomous, and above any human intent or act of will, one's own or others.
All right, hold on. I really want to butt in here. This is the first thing. Like, if you're ever learning science, this is one of the first things that they cover is having you understand that there are optical illusions that can exist in life. There are, have you ever heard like audio playbacks of certain things? It sounds like certain words, but then if you're reading a different word, it sounds completely different. The human mind is so flawed that a bunch of people can look at the same thing happening and walk away and say completely different things happen. Taking, like the idea of what you see as evidence is so flawed that science cannot take it seriously, and it is the lowest form of evidence there is in science. Somebody's word for it, um, and and so that's why we need the scientific method, where you have falsifiability is a big one. This is falsifiability is not on this list, but it is important to talk about. It's not a fallacy; it's actually reasonability. Falsifiability is the concept of whatever premise I believe, I must have a test that I can do to determine if it's false, if it is false. Because if you don't have a falsifiable premise to anything you believe, literally anything, if you don't have that and you're wrong, you would never know that you're wrong. And so that is the one thing that is a requirement in science. Right, stop. If it's falsifiable, it is science, and if it's not falsifiable, it isn't science. The reason why math is the science of numbers is because you can hypothetically say, oh, I expect 1 plus 1 equals 2. And as long as I get that, I can say that's consistent beyond reasonable doubt. But if I'm ever doing math correctly and I get 1 plus 1 equals 3, well, then that would hypothetically falsify my notion. Obviously, this is an invalid analogy because we know math is absolute, but just in that analogy, you should expect a certain result if your hypothesis is correct. You never accept if hypothesis is correct, you just fail to reject it. Anyways, that's falsifiability. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that is the first thing you need to let go is like that your feelings are absolute, that your experience is absolute. And science is coming in here and saying, no, it's the furthest thing from the truth. That's why we need science. That's why we can't just take people's word for it. Which is very unfortunate because eyewitness testimony, while in science is the lowest form of evidence, in legality, it's considered one of the highest forms of evidence, which concerns me greatly.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt there, but I thought that was important.
No, you're good. No, it's a good thing to share. So all the things I just said and that I read, I'm actually going to read it again because
Go ahead.
There's a
There was
qualifying
a
statement
disturbance called Bryce that
no, never a
interrupted.
disturbance. Always a positive contextual attitude. Yep, the affective fallacy, absolutely. Also, the romantic fallacy, emotion over reflection, quote, follow your heart. An extremely common modern fallacy of pathos that's one's emotions, urges, or quote, feelings are innate and in every case self-validating, autonomous, and above any human intent or act of will, one's own or others, and are thus immune to challenge or criticism. Super powerful. I'm already like, I can already feel my shit getting locked already. That's the powerful one.
It's so funny. It's like every fallacy is like, oh my god, I never thought of it.
Oh, it's so good.
And there's
this
over
fallacy-
100 of these.
Anyway, I know. In this fallacy, one urges, quote, I feel it, so it must be true. My feelings are valid, so you have no right to criticize what I say or do, or how I say or do it. This latter is also a fallacy of stasis, confusing respectful and reasoned response or refutation with personal invalidation, disrespect, prejudice, bigotry, sexism, homophobia, or hostility. A grossly sexist form of the affective fallacy is the well-known crude fallacy that the phallus has no conscience. Also, quote, a man's got to do what a man's got to do, quote, thinking with your other head. Example, since male sexuality is self-validating and beyond voluntary control, what one does wicked cannot be controlled either, as such actions are not open to criticism, an assertion eagerly embraced and extended beyond the male gender in certain ramifications of, quote, desire in contemporary academic theory. Also playing on emotion. Opposite to this fallacy is the chosen emotion fallacy, thanks to scholar Mark Lawson for identifying this fallacy, in which one falsely claims complete or at least reliable prior voluntary control over one's own autonomic, quote, gut level affective reactions. Closely related, if not identical to this last, is the ancient fallacy of angelism, falsely claiming that one is capable of, quote, objective reasoning and judgment without emotion, claiming for oneself a viewpoint of Olympian, quote, disinterested objectivity, or pretending to place oneself far above all personal feelings, temptations, or bias. Also, mortification.
Wow, that was huge. All right, so do you wanna break this down for yourself? Because I'm sure you have a lot to say on this one.
Yeah, this one brought up a whole bunch of stuff. My chest was on fire during this one. That was great. Yeah. So, damn, I
Pride.
can't leave that one over.
Pride.
Yeah, a lot of pride.
Take pride in learning something new.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see what you're saying. Yeah, so I think this one in particular, it touches on a couple of things that I'll say my own, like, I definitely recognize myself a ton in this one. I recognize a ton of bias in this one, but it's also it's interesting. It's for like, it's the bias that I feel poked at by looking at this came from pretty emotional places. So, as an example, as a kid, really big feeler, big emotions, and very frequently, especially growing up in the Midwest, feeling big things was not okay. It was like, it's like, and you can maybe attest to this if you experience the same thing. My experience of the culture in the Midwest was very heavily, you cannot be great, you cannot be bad. Everything is just either good or fine. It's just like middle of the road. And if you go outside of that line, my experience of it growing up was like tone down or don't be sad. Like there was literally a time where I was told by someone, if you're not going to be happy, I don't want you to be around. And it's like, what they just meant was, if you're not going to be docile and calm, then I don't want you around. And so there was a lot of pain associated with invalidating emotions, because like I'm feeling these very strong emotions. Therefore, I am being invalidated, was the thing that I came up with at around like 6 or 7 years old. So growing older, there was a desire to validate my own emotions, but also to validate the emotions of others. And to say, hey, allow these things to lead you. There's a lot of really valuable information in the emotions. And so there's been a lot of time where, even for myself or for other people, a very common thing that I would say, and I still stand by it to a degree, is follow the feeling. That if we have particular feelings about something, that there's something to be learned, something to be understood, especially when it comes to one's goals and becoming fulfilled and becoming happy. That I really do believe that it's important to listen to what the heart is saying, listen to what the emotions are saying, because it can have valuable information. But I can also see where I have, because of out of my spite or my pain or my challenge from my past, there was an over leaning on that principle, an over like saying, hey, like your emotions or your connection to the divine as an example. I don't think I've ever said that out loud or said that to anybody, but like that kind of rhetoric at one point, without question. And it also, as I'm reading too, poked a lot at perfectionism, which was a huge thing in myself. Because if you go back to the text, I'll see if I can find a spot that it really hit home. Um, using this latter is also a fallacy of stasis, confusing a respectful and reasoned response or refutation with personal invalidation, just like prejudice, bigotry, sexism, homophobia, or hostility, a grossly sexist form. No, that's not the part I was looking for. I'll just summarize in what I heard from as I was reading it. It's like, I think a big part of why people choose the affective fallacy, wanting their emotions to be truth, is because they're so afraid to quote unquote be wrong or to look bad. And so for myself, that was a big part of my life for a really long time, a really hard part of my life. Because growing up, it was completely intolerable and impossible to be wrong. If I was wrong, was punished heavily, rejected heavily, abandoned heavily. It was always met with huge amounts of punishment. And so
Here, I'm gonna pride you every time you recognize that.
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's I just noticed like, oh yeah, that's like I because it's like when I read this, I don't just think to myself, oh, how I done this, but it's also for myself and for whoever be listening. I also like want to think on, if I have done this, why? Because if I can understand why I did it, then I'm more willing to accept it and more willing to yield to the knowledge and the wisdom. Whereas if I don't give myself grace for how something got there, then I just look at it and go, well, this is fucking stupid. It's like, I don't want to, this thing isn't right. This is just something someone wrote. This is just one opinion. So it's just, I noticed that the two things for me that came up while I was reading it was a period of time when I was out of pain, leaning on my emotions because I felt like my emotions were invalidated by the people I loved for so long, but also out of pain of wanting to thinking I needed to be perfect always because being wrong was terrible. Therefore, if I felt emotions, they must be right, and I will always lean on them heavily because I need to be right always. I need to be certain always. And certainty is an emotional experience, not a factual, not a factual happening. So that was the two things that came up for me while I was reading it.
For sure. Yeah, I think that one is really powerful. I already brought it into it why I thought it was powerful because we now reliably know that um your emotions to make decisions are so ingrained in natural selection for survival rather than we don't live in that world anymore. Like we're not there's not a lion about to eat us. And we still have these same emotions when it comes to like relationships, because like all that training of natural selection that causes us to have our biases, which is beneficial in natural selection. But just like you learned in the ableism fallacy, just because something is the way it is doesn't mean that that's right.
Yep.
That we need to understand that just having emotion on something alone is not reason. It is the antithesis. Illogical. Fallacious. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that there's no merits.
What's interesting is coming up for me when we're sharing this is like, and I'm not sure again if this is covered in the list because again, there's over 100 of these.
Well, most likely, yeah. But go ahead.
There's something that I've been talking about a lot in the last, I want to say 6 months or so, in the speeches I've given with the clients I've been working with. There's difference between and or consciousness versus and consciousness. And what I mean when I say that is, it's like a lot of the times, if I were to say, as an example, I have room to improve. If I'm thinking in the context of or, meaning one thing is standalone and nullifies another, two opposing or two opposite or two different cannot exist at the same time. And if I say I have room to improve,
Right.
then in an or consciousness, it might also imply that I am a failure, as an example. With an and consciousness, it's I have room to improve and I'm doing great. And it's interesting as you're sharing the like, it doesn't mean it's not true.
It is a fallacy. It's called the false dichotomy or the either or fallacy.
Not either or. So it's like, you're saying, it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it doesn't have merit. It's like in order for someone, because even myself, as you said that, I noticed the part of me that struggled with decoupling truth and merit. And it was like, ooh, that's interesting. Where is that struggle coming from? And it's just like that desire for things to be dichotomous, the desire for things to be in opposition versus, all things all at once, which is a whole other can of worms.
But I think a lot of people want things to be true, and so they use whatever idea they could come up with and call it a reason to make it so, rather than the other way around, which is part of confirmation bias and argument to from consequence. Like I want something to be true, so I'm going to argue that it is first.
Yes. Are you familiar with human need psychology?
I am not.
Okay. So human need psychology, it's a little bit different from like, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Oh yeah. I used to go by that. That I've heard that is not quite correct.
Yeah. So it's similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the sense that there are like it labels a bunch of needs, but it doesn't label them in terms of like priority or if then. Like if this is met, then this is where one naturally goes, which is what Maslow's hierarchy of needs typically does. In human needs psychology, it just takes 7 human needs that we have that the argument is that every human is looking to get these 7 needs met in some way, shape, or form.
That makes more sense.
In any combination, and we do it in all different ways. And the argument is that even it's like someone could say, well, how could we all be so different if our needs are boiled down to only 7 different needs? Well, it's because we get them met in different ways. And so what it's having me think of is in the perspective of human needs psychology, the 7 human needs are the following: it's certainty, significance, variety, connection, love, growth, and contribution. And in the 7, the 1 or the 2 that oftentimes when people are afraid that they will reach for the most often in some type of a reactive state, meaning they're not being fully conscious or conscious of choosing what to do and when, but instead it's kind of a natural response or a body response. The 2 that they typically run to are certainty and significance. If I'm feeling very shaky, if I'm feeling like I'm losing, if I'm feeling like I am not just losing like a game, but I'm losing something, like I'm losing money, I'm losing trust, I'm losing a friend, I'm losing an argument. We the psychological perspective points to what we will naturally run towards unconsciously is wanting more certainty and wanting more significance. So meaning like example, if you notice two people who are fighting, very often arguments can, if they get heated and very angry and very charged, arguments often sound a lot like this. You're not listening to me. No, you're not listening to me. No, you're not listening to me. No, you're not listening to me. And then it gets more and more charged back and forth. And human needs psychology just basically makes the argument that says why that's happening is because each person desires to be right. And when someone is right, they acquire both certainty and significance at the same time. If I'm really pissed, like 10 out of 10 pissed, how certain do I typically feel? Well, when someone's really pissed, they usually feel 10 out of 10 certain. When they're the loudest speaker in the room, the loudest arguer, whatever, they typically feel 10 out of 10 significant. I'm special, I'm unique, I'm right, I've got it all figured out. And so it had me, we were sharing about this one, it really had me like, oh, it's like a lot of the times why people will want to base things off their emotions and say, my emotions are true. Oftentimes it's because like I need truth. In other words, I need certainty because I feel so uncertain. And if it's my emotions, well, my emotions are unique to me. Therefore, I am special. Therefore, I am significant. It's like, well, it's my emotions. My emotions are true. And it's like it meets those two very base needs very quickly. So it made a lot of sense, and it's also moving a lot of stuff in my system. It's a good one.
Mm-hmm. By the way, certainty does not correlate to accuracy.
Oh,
which is a common misconception that, well, the more certain I am, the more right I am. Like, no, because it's Dunning-Kruger effect. It's actually the opposite.
What's funny is like I think it's like no one would ever say that out loud, but that's 100% what they're all feeling, or what we are all feeling in those moments.
For sure. Well, there's some people that do say it out loud. I've seen this as an argument for religion a lot, where people say, "Oh, well, science is uncertain, therefore the Bible is true because it's certain." I'm like, no, that's not how it goes. In an argument against the Big Bang, they'd be like, "It's so certain that God did it." Like, okay, and you don't know where the universe came from, therefore you're less certain and I'm more right because I'm certain. Like, no, it's not valid. Fallacy. Sorry, bro.
Yeah. Well, and I like, and two, it's like, I think I like what you're, on the flip side of things, and I think this will be kind of a good, kind of a closing circle, because I do get to go here in a minute.
For sure.
Well, I like what you said earlier is like, it's like science is not proving that something is right. It's proving that it's like,
something else is
what are the exact words?
Yeah, so science has a rule against ever proving something in the positive. The best that you can do in the positive sense is say consistent beyond reasonable doubt. You can say every single time I run this test, I'm getting the same result. So it is now less and less and less likely that I will get a different result by doing the same test. But all you need to do is do this one test and get the wrong result once, or to be falsified. Absolutely. Because then that's where it falls into logic. So science and logic are slightly overlapped in the department of falsification. If two pieces of evidence show that a hypothesis is wrong, and there's no way for it to have them not contradict each other, then the hypothesis is falsified. And my hypothesis is every single person's favorite color must be the color of their car. And everyone in the car just so happens to be that I test in the world. Well, I could say that's consistent beyond reasonable doubt. But all I need to do is find one person where it doesn't match, and now the entire thing is falsified.
The claim of everyone's favorite color is the color of their car.
Yeah, it's falsifiable. But
Yeah.
if it turns out where all the evidence shows that it is, at no point can I ever say it's true. I could just say it's consistent beyond reasonable doubt that this is the case.
Yes.
There's no evidence against it, but it takes one person to falsify the whole thing.
Totally. Well, and for me, it's like, well, as long as the claim is everyone, right? If you said exactly
Right.
what the claim was, the majority of, and if it was one person, it still wouldn't falsify the entire argument.
Right, but that is still falsifiable too, because all you have to do is show that it's more than 50%. We could say, well, so far it looks like that it's consistent beyond reasonable doubt that it's more than 50%. But most of the time, science does make, like, when it comes to theories, they do make absolute claims because they are so falsifiable. Rather than most of the time, it is like general relativity is always true. That's super falsifiable, and we're looking for the evidence against it, and it's consistent beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah. And to me, it's like, for me, like my kind of, I say closing thought, not to like this is now how I want to wrap things up. It's just like, it's kind of a little rant I get to get along before I leave. Is like, I think what can happen a lot of the times is on the opposite side of the spectrum. So on one side, where it's like people who will make decisions or conclusions almost entirely based off of emotional guidance.
Yeah.
That's one side of the spectrum. Other side of the spectrum is like people will define things as ultimate truth because there's some type of study or science to back the statement they just said. But therefore, you're wrong.
They don't ever try to prove it wrong. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right. It means that you have found a study that's consistent with your claim. But it doesn't mean that you are in fact correct. And I think that's kind of where, like,
confirmation bias, the opposite of science.
Right. And it comes back,
if you only look for things, I think Tony Robbins says this, where like if you only, whatever you look for, you will find it.
Yep.
And that's what it is. If you're only looking for things that support your hypothesis, then that's all you will find.
Yes.
Then it's you must look for things that falsify your hypothesis. And if it's falsified, if you found something that contradicts it, you must have the pride, not the shame, but the pride to say, I have now learned something new by falsifying what I've once believed. That's what science does.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I think, like, ultimately, and we may find more themes. I think we will actually very likely find multiple themes as we go through this. But I think a huge theme that, like, will remain present throughout the entirety of this discussion is going to be the willingness to be wrong.
No
matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter how certain or uncertain or what have you, it's like that you are about your position. It's just like, are you willing to be wrong? And like from like, even from our conversations, the first one and this one, multiple times over, the part of me that I feel present is the part of me that doesn't want to be wrong. I'll listen, I'll read out one of the fallacies, and then my heart will start to race, or my stomach will start to have butterflies or whatever. It's like a part of my body gets uncomfortable. And it's like and I know, just because it's like I know my own body well enough at this point, it's like, yeah, it's just because I'm afraid of being wrong.
Right. I felt the same way too. 2 or 3 years ago, I have now trained myself to be excited to be wrong rather than try to not. And that's the scientific mindset versus all other thinking, is that scientists are excited to be wrong and no one else is.
Oh, super good.
I'll leave it with this one. I'll leave with this one last thing. If what you believe is unfalsifiable, then there's no reason to believe it. So find falsifiability in everything. Find a way for whatever you believe to be falsifiable and be ready to change your opinion given new information if it is indeed false. And if it is falsifiable and you can't falsify it, well, congratulations, you are now reasonable.
Reasonable, but not right.
No, you are right. Again, in as consistent beyond reasonable doubt, you can be right. There's no absolute in the positive. There's absolute in the negative. So the best you could do in the positive is it's consistent beyond reasonable doubt. If you try to prove yourself wrong all the time and you no longer can do it, then what's left over is reasonable.
Right. So what I'm saying is reasonable, not reasonable, comma, not right.
But there's no, if we're talking from a scientific standpoint, there is no right. It's not possible to achieve absolute right. So you could say, okay, yeah, sure. But just for the lay audience, people that like haven't dived into this, they might not sit well with not being right. They might think that's wrong.
Right.
So I don't want to use that terminology. So I would prefer to say consistent beyond reasonable doubt is the best that we could do. But you can, in a arbitrary sense, you can just call that right. It's not absolute, but there's no reason to believe that it's wrong. But therefore,
wouldn't that be equivocation?
No. Yeah. In the yeah, you're right. In oh god, what's the word? You say arbitrary? What's the word? There's a word for language that lay people use that that doesn't carry over to academic language. I'm forgetting it. But yes. In the same way that I can say, well, I have a theory that the presidential model in at Disneyland of Trump is actually Hillary Clinton, and they at the last second changed it to Trump, and that's why it looks so much like Hillary Clinton. I could say that's a theory, but it's not the same thing as the scientific theory like general relativity. So I'm mad at myself I forgot the word for it. But yes, yeah, you can say if being right is impossible, then we need to use the word that people mean it. Like if we're gonna say that general relativity is right, but we're also defining right as something that cannot be achieved, well then now we can never use that word again. Correct? So we have to be satisfied with the word right, meaning as true as it can be, consistent beyond reasonable doubt.
I personally
Is that satisfying or no?
No, I personally, for this particular thought experiment or for this particular exercise you and I are embarking on, I agree with you in a practical application, 100%.
Yeah, that's all I'm talking about. Because the people who are listening to this, might walk away from it like I can never be right about anything. No, calm down. You could still have a great confidence that you could be right about some things that are reasonable. That's one thing.
Right,
but I agree.
So, like in this context, is what if in our for strictly in this context for this thought exercise, for this experiential exercise between you and myself,
Sure. Okay.
we did not use the word right, but we used the word reasonable. And even for the person who they prefer to use the word right, I would argue that it would even be a net positive for someone to consistently listen to two human beings never use the word right, but instead use the word reasonable. Because in fact, it was you using that word in previous conversations before us leading up to this, where you were saying, oh, that sounds reasonable. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
It actually piqued my curiosity because I was like, interesting. He's saying reasonable, and that's a very, very specific word. I'm curious
Yes.
why he's using that very specific word.
You must have evidence to have reason.
Yeah. So to me, it's like I think for this particular thought exercise, I'd love to, rather than muddy the waters and go, oh, we can use right in this context, and here's how we equivocate it to make it work for this person. It's like, well, what if we just said reasonable throughout this time?
Okay, sure. Yeah. You can. I think that's fair. I think if we're replacing the word right with reasonable, with right not having an absolute sense and just saying reasonable, then sure, that's fine. I don't want to completely, I don't want to encourage society, those who are listening. I don't want to encourage you to never use the word right again. You just, you need to make sure that you tried your best to falsify whatever thing you're saying you can't anymore. You can say this is reasonable. This is, so far to my understanding, this is right. I think that's fine to say. There's no absolute positive except in mathematics and logic. In science, the best you can achieve is consistent beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah. I'm at cool for it.
All right. Sorry it cut to overtime, but I think we made progress.
No, I thought it was a good and good and necessary cap on this session. So next time we went through 1 through 5 on this one. So the next one we'll start with number 6.
Yes. All right. Excited.